You're getting to be a big boy.
I'm just a kid who's 4. Each day I grow some more. I like exploring. I'm Caillou. So many things to do. Each day is something new. I'll share them with you. I'm Caillou.
The original Caillou came out September 15, 1997, and then, lo and behold, they made a reboot in February 15th, 2024. The first episode of this 3D animated reboot is called The Pirate Captain's Treasure. In this episode, Caillou's grandparents take Caillou and his sister on this fun treasure hunt on the beach. So they hide Caillou's beach toys and tell him, that might be the treasure. So Caillou and his sister are motivated to go find the treasure based off of clues that his grandparents give him. So the first clue that his grandparents give him is that there is a seahorse who lives under the sea, but when you're tired, you can rest on me. That's kind of a confusing riddle, but like maybe kids will get it. But anyway, Caillou understandably thinks that they're talking about a bed because you typically go to sleep and rest on a bed. So he goes and checks the bedroom, but Rosie actually goes and checks the chair where there is a pillow with a picture of a seahorse on. So the next riddle is that there is a seashell that likes butterflies, a seashell that's around butterflies basically. So Caillou is thinking about seashells, so he just goes on the beach and looks for seashells, but he does not find the clue. Rosie actually goes into the garden and finds the seashell because, butterflies are in the garden. That's where the butterflies perch. So Caillou is upset because Rosie is the one that is solving these riddles. He thinks he's supposed to be the big brother, the captain of the ship, and Rosie is his crewmate, and she's actually the one accomplishing things. So they have this imagination sequence. It's really boring, really long. In summary, you just need to know that at the end, Caillou appreciates Rosie and understands that without her, he would not have made it this far in their imagination sequence, and without her, he would not have made it anywhere, like period, because Caillou didn't solve any riddles. He's completely reliant on his younger sister. So I guess I understand why he was ticked off about that. But anyway, he apologizes to his sister and they work together and whatnot. But the last riddle is just an X marks the spot.
Now, when I go back and we rewind the episode, I think I caught something. Do you guys see that? The X was there all along. So we go back to the end of the episode. All this was completely pointless.
Yeah, so basically, Caillou's grandparents had them go on this long, drawn-out treasure hunt for no reason. They find the treasure, they dig it up, and lo and behold, it's the beach toy, so now they can have a fun day at the beach and whatever. But the lesson that they were trying to go for here was basically for Caillou to just appreciate that his sister is solving the riddles and not to get all jealous and bitter and salty and whatnot. I think the message would have worked a lot better if this was an actual competition, because Caillou should be happy that he's working together with Rosie in order to find the treasure, but because they aren't competing against each other, Caillou's spite and his jealousy just comes across as him being a little turd, which checks out. I mean, that's the reputation that Caillou has, a little tantrum-throwing turd, so I guess it's canon. But yeah, I think if they really wanted this message to hit, Caillou and Rosie should have been competing against one another, and Rosie should have won, and then the lesson would have been, it's okay to lose as long as you're having fun. It's a very generic lesson, but it's a lesson that kids do need to learn because kids do get overly competitive and they do get, bitter about losing and stuff.
Now, episode 2 is Sore Yuxalot. Caillou's in the kitchen with his father making dessert, banana pudding. Classic father-son bonding time. But Caillou, he's mixing. He says he's done. Father comes in, gets the tray. Pour it in. Pour your mixture in. That liquid turned into a solid real quick. It was not a liquid anymore. She poured it from the spoon and it went straight to a solid. But we're going to move past that because Dad came in. He's like, oh, we got the whipping cream. Caillou perfectly puts the whipping cream, and he's like, I'm ready to eat my dessert. But Dad tells Caillou, hold on, we gotta eat dinner. And what is dinner? Dad calls dinner chicken a la daddy. Don't ever let this man name any food ever again. Meals are off limits. I don't know what that was. But we fast forward, everybody's at the kitchen table, and Caillou, he's sitting down, and he looks at his food in disgust. And I would look at it too in disgust, because what am I looking at? The mashed potatoes look cold and hard. The broccoli has red spots on them. And then where's the chicken? This gotta be chicken tenders? These aren't chicken nuggets? And then Caillou complaining about it's too saucy. I see like specks of ketchup. It's not dripping in sauce. But Dad's like, hey, Caillou, you're not eating. Rosie eating just fine. The parents are eating just fine. Their plates are 3 times Caillou's size for whatever reason. But Caillou, finally tries the chicken whatever, and he's like, yup! Which is understandable, because I don't know what he's consuming. The dad's like, oh, Caillou, you can't say that. That's rude. So Caillou's like, I'm not trying to try this again. But his mom's like, maybe the second bite is better than the first one. But Caillou not even trying to stomach that. So, like, a kid does, he fakes eats it. Yum, 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 yum. Mom's looking directly in his eyes while he's doing it. And he's like, Caillou, I know you didn't eat. So Caillou's like, plan B. Grab a napkin, put it over the food. Everybody else ain't done eating. But Caillou just like, oh, I'm done eating. I'm ready for dessert. And his dad's like, please. Picks it up, looks at Caillou, and it's like, come on, Caillou. Eat the food. Now, I know as a kid, if you don't like something, you got tactics. But you got to wait till everybody else is done eating. They leave the table before you start executing. There's the put it under the table. That's like a cool 5 out of 10. Sometimes the go-to, you put a napkin over it. You start mixing it up. You could leave it in the microwave, hope nobody, takes it, so you can throw it in the trash at night. Or you put, if you have a paper plate, you put 2 paper plates over it, and then you stuff it in the trash. But Caillou wasn't thinking that far ahead.
Okay, so then Caillou has another imagination sequence. And this time, Caillou imagines himself as a knight in service to a great king. Or should I say a not-so-great king, because the king is imagined as his ungrateful father. So the king is hungry, and he demands that Caillou fix him dishes, something that can fill his belly and satisfy his craving. So Caillou makes several dishes in a row, back to back to back. And each time the king says, yuck, he even says, disgusting. But anyway, the pattern repeats, and the king continues to send the food away on this catapult, and then a dragon eats it. So Caillou is getting very frustrated, he's seeing how his dad felt when he said yuck, because he's like, man, it really hurts when someone tells you that your food is yucky and disgusting. So he tries really hard. He tries one more time. He gets this giant fruit tower, and he brings it to the king. And he's like, nothing can go wrong, nothing can go wrong. Everyone loves fruit. So the king gets his fork, sticks it in the blueberry, eats the blueberry, then looks down at the plate, sees something he don't like, and says, yuck, disgusting, bring me my catapult. Then Caillou has a reasonable crash out. He calls out the king for being ungrateful, saying, I may be a brave knight, but even my armor can't protect me from words that hurt. So cringy, but I guess it's good for the kids or whatever. But the Caillou basically says, why don't you just tell me what you don't like about the food? And it turns out the king can't stand the color orange. Not the flavor orange. Let's make that distinction very clear. Not the flavor orange, because that would actually make some sense. He just doesn't like the color orange. So every single time Caillou brought him food, there was something orange in it, like the orange cheese on the pizza, or the orange carrots in the soup. But most of the time when they play out that montage, we don't see the king actually eat anything before he sends out the catapult. So he just saw the orange food, said it was disgusting, and yeeted it away. So this analogy doesn't really work here because in the previous scene, Caillou actually tried the food and didn't like the taste. Now he did mention that he didn't like the red sauce, but he did try it though. He didn't just say, oh, I hate the red sauce, I'm not going to try it. He did try it, and then he said, yuck, he hated both how it looked and how it tastes. But this king actually only hates the color orange. He only hates how it looks. So that doesn't make any sense. The most wild thing is when he ate the blueberry and looked down at the plate, saw the orange, and decided to dismiss the whole meal. So naturally, things get resolved. Caillou basically says, hey, I'll get rid of all the orange stuff. And then the king is able to enjoy Caillou's food because he doesn't have the color orange on the plate anymore. So screw the king, because my favorite color is orange. But anyway, the scene cuts back to reality, and Caillou basically learns to express his negative opinions in a tactful and respectful manner. So he tries the other food that his dad made, the questionable looking broccoli and mashed potatoes, and that's all yummy and good for him, but that weird chicken nugget ketchup or whatever that was, I don't even really just explain what it is. He doesn't eat that. The dad scrapes that off his plate and he just gives him more of the broccoli and mashed potatoes or whatever. So the lesson is basically, little kids, make sure that you express your negative opinions in a respectful manner.
Ugh, yuck, bleh.
Yucky, disgusting, bleh, yuck, ugh, all yucky, yuck, bleh.
Now, Caillou, we didn't really grow up watching Caillou. But is this new Caillou better? I don't know. But is it egregious? Nah. Would you watch it with your kids? I wouldn't say all that, but it's not brain numbing like Dora. Caillou, you can watch it and put it on for your kids.